It's all started when I did the Spectacle program, which I produced with David. And the first program on Spectacle was me and Elvis talking about my career and what influenced me. And the theme from the show, Elvis said, choose 3 great singer-songwriters you think have been ignored. And I chose David Ackles, Laura Nyro, and Leon Russell. So the seed was planted then, and because I chose those 3 artists, David, who's 15 years younger than me, didn't really know anything about them, and bought all their albums, put them on his iPod, and listened to them. And so he happened to have the Leon Russell record on his iPod in Africa, and was happening to play it that lunchtime. So it's kind of like a kismet thing, this record. It seemed to be fate that we were going to do this. I was back in the same room in Africa this year, a year later, and actually 14 months later, in March instead of January, and we'd actually done the album, and that was why I made the phone call to Leon from that room, and here we are 40 months later, and we've got a record done. You come back here in your cowboy boots, dressed to kill in your monkey suit. Every boat you strike, everything they shoot, so you're dressed to kill in your monkey suit. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to make another record, I've made 40-odd albums. The world isn't screaming for another Elton John record. I'm not screaming to make another record unless it's special. I thought, and if I'm going to make a record, before this even came up, my template was Modern Times by Bob Dylan, because I thought, this is the man, you know, who's made so many records, who made this incredible record that sounded like velvet, but it sounded modern, but it sounded old at the same time, and that's the kind of record I wanted to make. I wanted to make live records again, as far as actually putting the track down with a band on analog instead of digital, which, you know, Neil Young has been telling me to do for so long. And that's what I did. And with T-Bone, we had Jim Keltner and Jay Belrose on drums, and Booker T on organ, and a guy called Keefus on keyboards. On guitar, we had Mark Rebo, and bass Dennis Crouch. Most of the tracks were done 2 takes, that's it. In fact, Monkey Suit, was the original piano track that Leon and I put down in October when we wrote the song. And we just kept it. It was perfectly in time, and we put the band onto that. But most of the tracks were done in 2 takes and with live musicians. And I hadn't done that for a long time. You get into the, of putting the piano down first, and the bass and the drums, and it honestly doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't. When you put something down live, it stretches, it's looser. You know, recently Exile on Main Street was re-released, and it's very loose, and that's the quality. It's one of the greatest rock and roll records ever made, because it was done live, and that's the quality I think you've got with this record. You know, some of it is an imperfect time. Some of it is a little rough around the edges maybe sometimes, but that was good for me. I had to make a record, and to make a record that I wanted to do, I had to go back to go forward. I had to go back to making records that were done live again. I think I found the way I want to make records now. I don't have to make pop records anymore. You know, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, the record companies would always say, you've got to have a single, you must have a single. And you know, I think I fulfilled my brief, but in the end, you don't want to do that. You just want to, at 63 years of age, the singles chart is one that I'm not going to be in very often anymore, and I realize that. So I just going to make records that I think, as a musician and as a singer, that fit what I want to do at my age. And I don't think I'm going to be doing Crocodile Rock anymore or anything like that. That was in the past. I love doing things like writing for the Scissor Sisters, you know, being on the Tupac record. Those little side projects are fantastic. You know, the Ironic Tiny Dancer. They're the little icings on the cake. But to me now, it's all about writing albums and trying to be the mature 63-year-old and, you know, playing with great live musicians and putting it down straight away.